Venezuela pays for imports from Iran and Turkey with Bitcoin to evade sanctions. Morgan Stanley strategies: Bitcoin rising to replace US dollar as world's reserve currency. Founder of world's largest hedge fund, Dalio, sees Bitcoin as gold alternative in portfolios. Hey guys, welcome to my slides info. In today's slides, we continue to explore the evolution of Bitcoin and how it's changing the world and how it's changing minds of people who didn't believe in it at first. Billionaire hedge fund manager Dalio, a long-term Bitcoin skeptic, is warming up to the cryptocurrency. The founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, now sees that Bitcoin could serve as a diversifier to gold and other such storehold of wealth assets. In our previous videos, we talked about Dalio and his skepticism over Bitcoins and how he thought it wasn't a storehold of value and how he thought it was too volatile and it wasn't a good means of exchange. But recently, his ideas have been changing with the rising prices of Bitcoin and more institutional investments. Dalio is starting to change his stance on Bitcoins. Now he sees it as an alternative to gold. Gold has been there forever. Now, interestingly, Bitcoin is competing with gold, which we see as the prices of gold starting to fall a little bit owing to a lot of investments into Bitcoins, and this is something we'll see more of in the months and years to come. Bitcoin has come to stay and it's making a lot of changes in the world, and people like Dalio, who understand money a lot, at first didn't trust Bitcoin, but now they're starting to see what Bitcoin can really do in the world, and the fact that Bitcoin can reach even the poorest of persons makes it really unique and something special to trading or investing. We see a lot of banks are starting to buy more Bitcoins, store more Bitcoins. Many companies starting to invest in Bitcoins because there's really no option here. So Dalio, whether or not he changes his stance, doesn't matter, because what Bitcoin is doing is not something anybody could change, even governments, which in our next slide we'll see what Venezuela is doing on Bitcoin. As we mentioned earlier, Venezuela is one of those countries that move into Bitcoins early on because of the ban by the US to use dollars. Venezuela is reportedly paying companies in allied countries, including Iran and Turkey, with Bitcoin to mitigate the effect of US sanctions on its economy. The Venezuelan government is also planning to increase Bitcoin usage now that it has a dedicated cryptocurrency mining center. Venezuela has been using Bitcoin to pay for imports from allied countries. Local news outlets Run.es reported this week. The government of President Nicolas Maduro is also planning to increase its usage of Bitcoin in trade now that the Venezuelan army is actively mining the cryptocurrency at its recently inaugurated crypto mining center, the publication added, quoting sources from the Central Bank of Venezuela. So we see the US is a very powerful country that can decide the fate of any country in the world because of its dollar and the power of dollar. The US can choose to kill a country or not. And this is because the reserve currency is the dollar. Every country needs it in order to trade internationally. But with the coming of Bitcoins, that has been changing, and that will continue to change. as countries like Venezuela and Iran, which have been sanctioned by the US, are forced to use Bitcoins in order to continue to trade. Every country has to survive. So here we're looking at a world where there won't be any more monopoly of power or of currency. Bitcoin, the good thing about it is it's decentralized and any person can own it and transfer it to anywhere. So these countries that have been pushed by the US can bounce back owing to Bitcoin. So we see Venezuela can still pay for imports into the country with Bitcoins. Meanwhile, Iran, we saw in our last video, Iran can actually buy as well with Bitcoins, buy or sell both ways. We see how Bitcoin will eventually replace the dollar as a reserve currency, which we'll see in our next slide. Morgan Stanley's global strategists have made a case that Bitcoin is making progress towards replacing US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Do not assume that your traditional currencies are the only store of value or mediums of exchange that people will ever trust, he warned governments. Of course, governments already feel threatened by the wide usage of Bitcoins, and as time is going by, more and more adoption is happening with Bitcoins. So I'm sure governments are really worried right now, which is why they're creating their own digital currencies. We see the case of China and even USA, France, all these big countries, they're starting to move into digital currencies, something to fight Bitcoin. Because as long as Bitcoin is alone, central banks are threatened, so they need something as well. But I see how Bitcoin will continue to grow even as these countries create their own separate digital currencies. They'll still be forced to use Bitcoins at some point in order to do stuff. They can't ban it nor completely ignore it. They just have to use it. We saw in our last slide where a bank in China used Bitcoin to sell bonds in Malaysia. You see how they try to ignore it, but at the same time they need it for stuff. That's going to keep happening, you see. And more institutions are starting to believe in Bitcoins a lot more. So that's it for today's slides. And I hope it was educative and enjoyable at the same time. If you like the video, please subscribe for more videos like this. See you again in my next slides. Bye.